17 outrageous seasons, the reality show Naked and Afraid has been teaming up two complete strangers, dropping them in some of the most extreme environments on the planet, pushing the limits of survival with no food, no water, get this, no clothes.
Here's the thing about reality TV. Discovery actually has a vault of Naked and Afraid episodes so dangerous they've been scrubbed from streaming. But why? Well, the following episodes were more than just survival mishaps. They were massive legal liabilities where producers allegedly prioritized drama over life. According to The Hollywood Reporter, producers often walk a razor-thin line with legal risks, sometimes pushing contestants until they literally break. But this was different. The first episode featured a production team that allegedly calculated a contestant's collapse. Let's check it out. The anatomy of a blackout. The thing about reality TV is that we usually assume the drama we see is the whole story. But behind the scenes, there is a multi-billion-dollar network machinery designed specifically to erase history when things get too real. Before a contestant ever sets foot in the jungle, they are handed a document that is essentially a legal kill switch for their own reputation. According to the ResearchGate study on unique legal considerations in reality television, these are often contracts of adhesion, which is a fancy way of saying take-it-or-leave-it agreements that leave the participant with zero leverage. When an episode vanishes from Discovery Plus, or certain scenes are edited beyond recognition, it isn't a glitch in the app. It is the network exercising a right they bought for a few $1,000s. Here is where it gets interesting and, honestly, a little terrifying. These contracts include something often called the villain arc clause, which literally gives producers the legal right to portray a contestant in any way they choose, even if that portrayal is entirely defamatory or false. Think about that for a second. You sign a paper that says the network can edit you to look like a coward or a monster, and you have absolutely no right to sue them for it. In fact, according to the files of the All-Stars contestant contract found on Scribd, participants also have to sit through a 50-page briefing that is colloquially known as the talk of death. It is a brutal, line-by-line breakdown of every way you could die, get maimed, or lose your mind, and you have to initial every single one to prove you were warned. It makes you realize that these people aren't just survivalists. They are people who signed away their right to the truth in exchange for a 21-day challenge and a tiny paycheck. The uncomfortable truth is that the network cares about story beats far more than human safety, and when those beats lead to a massive legal liability, they simply engage the ghosting protocol. They pull the episode from the library, they stop airing it on cable, and they act like it never happened. It's like a digital memory hole where the most harrowing moments of someone's life are deleted to protect a corporate shield. Now, here's where it gets weird. If you were starving in the wild and realized the people filming you were actually legally protected if they chose not to help you, would you still trust them to call a medic? Every legend of the wild has a hero, but in the world of reality survival, the hero is whoever the editors decided would make the best ratings that week. You could be the most capable survivalist on Earth, but if the contract says you're the villain, that's the only version of you the world will ever see. But wait, because as much as these lawyers tried to lock everything down, no legal document could hide the sheer chaos that unfolded in the Brazilian jungle during Season 4. Episode 1. The Psychological Trap. The reality of what happened in the Brazilian jungle during Season 4 of Naked and Afraid is so far removed from the official version that it actually calls into question everything we think we know about reality TV survival. We saw Honora Bowen as the ultimate villain, the woman who famously threw her partner's survival gear into the water and walked away in a fit of rage. But here is where it gets interesting, because the footage you saw was only half the story. According to an explosive interview Honora gave to Reality Blurred, she wasn't just having a bad day. She was caught in a psychological trap that had been carefully laid out before she even touched down in South Africa or Brazil. Imagine being dropped into one of the most hostile environments on Earth, only to realize that the people with the cameras aren't just watching you, they are actively trying to break you for the sake of a better character arc. The thing about Honora is that she was what producers call good TV, which is essentially code for someone they can easily push to an emotional edge. According to the claims she later posted on Reddit, the production team didn't just find her a partner, they intentionally paired her with people designed to trigger her existing stress points. But wait, it actually gets weirder than that. You remember that whole backstory about her carrying a magnifying glass because her father used one to survive? Honora claims that it was a complete fabrication by the production team. She says they literally handed her the magnifying glass and told her to tell that story because a fire starter wasn't dramatic enough for the narrative they were building. It was the first sign that the network wasn't filming a survival challenge. They were directing a scripted drama, where she was the unsuspecting lead. Now, here is the absolutely chilling part. Honora later alleged that while she was in the jungle, the production team began withholding her prescribed medication. We aren't just talking about vitamins here, we are talking about the actual support system she needed to stay mentally grounded in a high-stress environment. According to her detailed breakdown on Reddit, when she realized she was losing her grip and asked to leave, the producers didn't call a medic or an extraction team. Instead, they allegedly told her to stay out there and keep filming. Think about that for a second. You are naked, starving, and realize your own brain is starting to betray you because your medication has been taken away, and the people in charge are telling you that you aren't done yet. It makes you realize that this wasn't a survival failure on Honora's part, it was a massive production success that went so far it became a legal liability. When we saw her throwing that gear into the river, it looked like a petty act of revenge against her partners. But according to Honora's perspective, that was actually a calculated move of desperation. She realized that as long as she was surviving, the cameras would keep rolling and the producers would keep her in that jungle. If you could see through the ground right now, you'd see a woman who realized that destroying the equipment was the only way to force the production team to recognize that the game was over. Would you throw your gear into the water if it were the only way to force the cameras to stop rolling and get yourself to safety? The uncomfortable truth is that the medical tap we see on screen isn't always about a physical injury. In Honora's case, she allegedly had to outsmart the producers by faking a medical emergency just to get them to pull her out of the situation. According to the files of her public statements, she felt like a prisoner to the footage, and the only way to escape was to become such a liability that they had no choice but to extract her. It's a staggering look at the power dynamic on these sets, where the truth of your mental health is worth less than a few minutes of a mid-season breakdown. Looking back at the footage now, you can see the moments where the cracks were being widened by the people behind the lens. The network wanted a villain, and they were willing to orchestrate a literal mental break to get one. And get this, according to the legal analysis of these reality contracts, what happened to Honora isn't even technically illegal because of the waivers she signed, even if it feels entirely immoral. But the cameras didn't just watch the breakdown, they actively delayed the rescue to ensure they caught every single second of the collapse on high-definition film. It's a reminder that in the vault, the scariest thing isn't the predators in the bushes. It's the people standing just out of frame with a script and a legal shield. The ghost in the Brazilian jungle. If we thought the psychological games in Brazil were bad, here is where it gets absolutely dark. Because when the mental manipulation stops, the physical reality of what happens when the cameras keep rolling is much worse. We're talking about an incident that has become legendary in the banned circles of this show, something often referred to as the nipple pinch incident. To understand why this is such a big deal, you have to picture the scene. Honora Bowen is on the ground, seemingly unconscious after days of heat, starvation, and what she claimed was withheld medication. Instead of an immediate professional medical evacuation, what happened next was caught on a camera that was never supposed to be seen by the public. According to discussions among the community on Reddit, a producer or medic on site allegedly leaned over her and pinched her nipple to check for a pain response, basically trying to see if she was faking her condition to get off the show. Think about that for a second. You are lying there, physically and mentally broken, and instead of receiving standard medical care, you are subjected to a highly invasive and arguably non-consensual physical test, while a camera crew stands by to document whether or not you flinch. It brings up a terrifying question about the thin line between emergency medical intervention and actual assault on a reality TV set. According to an investigative piece by The Guardian on the dangers of reality shows like Survivor and Naked and Afraid, there is a systemic issue where the medical staff on these sets often find themselves in a massive conflict of interest. Are they there to protect the patient, or are they there to protect the production's investment? The uncomfortable truth is that in the world of high-stakes reality TV, the medical team often works for the producer, not the patient. Their job isn't just to keep you healthy. It's to verify if you can keep filming so the network doesn't lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost footage. When that medic allegedly reached out to pinch Honora, they weren't just checking her vitals, they were checking the production schedule. It's a staggering look at the legal shield we mentioned earlier, where, because she signed a 50-page waiver, her own body practically becomes property of the network for those 21 days. Imagine you're in a position of total vulnerability, completely naked in a jungle, and the person who is supposed to be your lifesaver is actually looking for an excuse to keep you in the game. Does knowing that the medics might be incentivized to keep you suffering for the sake of the story make the show feel more like a survival challenge or more like a modern-day gladiator arena? Every legend has a hero, but in this specific chapter of the Naked and Afraid history, the heroes are nowhere to be found. Instead, we're left with a cold, calculated evaluation of how much pain a human being can endure before the footage becomes unusable. And get this, the reason this specific case study is so vital to the vault is because it highlights the extreme modernity of these logistics. They aren't just filming survival, they are managing it like a corporate project with key performance indicators. Honora claimed that this incident was a turning point, the moment she realized that no one was coming to save her unless she became a massive legal liability. It's a terrifying shift in perspective when you realize that the predators in the bushes aren't nearly as dangerous as the person holding the clipboard. According to the files, even after this incident, the show continued to air her breakdown as a character flaw, conveniently leaving out the part where her medical ethics were seemingly tossed aside for a better ratings spike. Here's where it gets even heavier. Honora later revealed that the production team wasn't just ignoring her physical state. They were actively gaslighting her into believing she was fine, so they could capture more climax footage. According to Reality Blurred, this wasn't an isolated mistake by one rogue medic. It was the standard operating procedure for a network that viewed contestants as expendable assets. The pressure to stay out there is so intense that contestants often feel they have to act out or create a scene just to be taken seriously by the medical staff. It's a twisted feedback loop where the more you suffer, the more valuable you are to the network, and the less likely they are to let you leave. The reality of these banned episodes is that they show us the parts of the machine that weren't supposed to be visible. We like to think of these shows as a test of the human spirit, but when you look at the logs and the testimonies, it looks more like a test of how much a network can get away with before a lawyer steps in. It's a reminder that what we call entertainment is often built on a foundation of orchestrated suffering that would be illegal in almost any other workplace. If the mental pain was manufactured to create a villain, the physical victories and medical rescues were often just as staged to keep the narrative moving toward a satisfying conclusion. But wait, because as messy as the medical side was, the environmental reality of what they were breathing and drinking was even more lethal. Episode 2. The Planted Scandal. The thing about reality TV is that we've been conditioned to believe the big wins are moments of pure grit, but sometimes the timing is so perfect, it actually starts to feel a little bit suspicious. In the very first season of Naked and Afraid, we were introduced to Shane Lewis and Kim Shelton as they struggled through the grueling Costa Rican jungle. They were starving, weak, and on the verge of a total physical collapse when suddenly, almost like a miracle from the production gods, they stumbled upon a massive pig carcass. It was the save of the season, a protein-packed victory that supposedly turned their entire challenge around. But here is where it gets really interesting. Once the cameras stopped rolling and the contracts started to expire, the truth about that pig began to leak out. According to an explosive report by E! Online, several contestants, including Shane himself, later came forward with claims that the show was far more staged than the network ever admitted. The suspicious part isn't just that they found food, it's the technical errors in the footage that suggest the animal didn't just wander into their trap. If you look closely at the raw sequence, the camera angles are perfectly positioned before the kill even happens, and there are subtle indications that the pig may have been tethered or placed there by the crew to ensure the story had its climax. It's absolutely wild to think about, but when you're spending millions on a production, you can't exactly wait for nature to decide when the heroes get to eat. Think about that for a second, because it completely changes how you view a survival test. You're watching these people shiver and starve, feeling genuine empathy for their plight, while just a few feet away, a producer is potentially checking their watch and deciding it's time to plant the next plot point. According to a detailed breakdown by Distractify, this isn't an isolated theory. It's a recurring criticism that the show functions more like a nature documentary with actors than a raw, unscripted reality. They aren't just filming a challenge, they are crafting a narrative where the environment is the antagonist. And sometimes, that antagonist needs a little help to keep the viewers from changing the channel. And get this, the technical precision required to film a wild animal encounter is so high that it almost always betrays the reality of the situation. Can you really trust a kill if the camera is already perfectly positioned in the bushes before the trap even snaps? In the world of high-end production, luck is usually just another word for preparation. For Shane and Kim, that pig meant the difference between a medical tap and a successful extraction. But for the network, it meant a high-ratings finale. It makes you realize that the primitive world we see on screen is often a carefully manicured set where the stakes are managed by people in air-conditioned tents. But wait, it actually gets weirder when you look at how the production team handles these miracles after the fact. According to a 2024 analysis by Distractify, there have been multiple instances where contestants reported that random finds, like a perfectly placed turtle or a convenient patch of edible fruit, seemed to appear right after the crew had finished their lunch break. It raises a massive ethical question. If you're being told this is a 21-day test of human endurance, but the endurance is being supplemented by a production assistant with a cooler, is it still a survival show? For someone like Shane, who has been vocal about the fake nature of these setups, the frustration comes from the fact that the audience is being sold a lie of total isolation, while the reality is a crowded film set. Here is the thing about those kill shots: they are the most expensive minutes of any episode. If a contestant fails to catch anything for 14 days, the show loses its momentum. So, according to the files of various behind-the-scenes leaks, producers allegedly use animal handlers to ensure that when a trap is set, it actually catches something. They aren't just filming a hunter, they are ensuring the hunter has a target. It's a level of orchestration that makes you wonder how much of the struggle is genuine and how much is just a performance for the lens. Imagine sitting there, truly hungry, while you wait for a crew member to release a pig into your trap so you can discover it for the cameras. It's a bizarre, hollow way to win. The uncomfortable truth we have to face here is that the mystery of how they survived was never really a mystery at all. They survived because the production team couldn't afford for them to fail. When you realize that the food was potentially delivered like an Uber Eats order for the soul, the survival aspect starts to feel a bit like a hollow victory. But wait, because while a fake pig carcass was a scandal that hit the tabloids, what was happening in the more remote locations was far more dangerous. It turns out that while the network could fake a meal, it couldn't fake the biological reality of the jungle. As we move deeper into the vault, we find cases where the environmental risks weren't just dramatized. They were ignored until it was almost too late. But while a fake pig was a scandal, a real virus was a death sentence. Episode 3, The Negligence File. Here's the thing about The Vault. The most dangerous episodes aren't necessarily the ones where someone gets eaten by a lion. They are the ones where the network's own safety protocols literally became the predator. We like to think there is a team of elite medics standing just 10 feet away behind a green screen, ready to swoop in the second someone coughs. But the reality is much more chilling. According to a deep dive by Vice into the show's behind-the-scenes secrets, those medics are often stationed 45 minutes to an hour away from the actual survival site. When a contestant starts to flag, they aren't met with an immediate IV drip, they are met with a wait-for-the-shot policy. The production team needs the dramatic tap-out footage before they allow a rescue, which means critically ill people are often left to rot in the sun just so the camera can capture that perfect tearful collapse. Now here is where it gets interesting, and honestly, quite terrifying, when we look at the case of Manu Toigo. Manu was a seasoned survivalist who went into the jungle and came out with something that nearly ended her life: dengue fever. During her challenge, she began to experience the brutal, bone-breaking pain that characterizes the virus. But according to reports shared in the Naked and Afraid community on Reddit, the response from the crew was anything but urgent. They didn't see a patient in need of an emergency room. They saw a character arc that needed a conclusion. This wasn't just a survival failure, it was a systemic disaster, where the protocol for good television was placed directly above the protocol for human survival. And get this, Manu's case revealed a massive gap in how reality handles actual biology. When she was finally evacuated, she wasn't just tired, she was experiencing internal hemorrhaging. But because the cameras need to justify the primitive survival rating drop, her agony was framed as an emotional struggle rather than a medical emergency. According to the files, the network essentially gambled that she would hold on long enough to get the money shot of her leaving the jungle. It's a staggering level of corporate coldness where the director is checking the lighting while the contestant is literally checking out of consciousness. The thing is, we've been conditioned to think that the medical staff on these shows are like hospital doctors, but they aren't. They are contractors hired to serve a production. If they pull someone too early, they ruin the shoot. If they wait too long, well, that's where the legal team comes in. According to the research files, the banned content in these instances isn't just a specific scene, it is the entire recorded proof of a network keeping a human being in a life-threatening situation for the sake of ratings. It's a realization that Discovery was almost entirely shielded from negligence claims because the participants had already signed away their rights in those 50-page waivers we discussed earlier. Think about that for a second. You are lying in the dirt, your organs are literally under attack from a tropical virus, and the people holding the cameras are making you wait because the lighting isn't right for the exit interview yet. It makes you wonder, if you were in Manu's position, would you realize you were being sacrificed for a season finale, or would you be too delirious to care? Every legend has a hero, but in the negligence file, the only thing we find is a cold corporate machine calculating the cost of a lawsuit versus the value of a viral clip. But wait, it gets even weirder because Manu's story didn't end in the jungle. She reportedly had to fight for months to get the network to even acknowledge the long-term damage the virus did to her body. According to the Vice investigation, the show's insurance often stops the moment you leave the set, leaving survivors to pay for their own life-saving treatments once they get home. It's a brutal, uncomfortable truth. You sign away your health for a few $1,000s, and once the shot is in the bag, you are effectively invisible to the people who just filmed your near-death experience. It really makes you rethink every time you see a medical tap on screen. Is that person truly being saved, or are we just seeing the exact moment the legal risk finally outweighed the potential for more drama? According to a report from The Hollywood Reporter, these decisions are rarely made by doctors in a vacuum. They involve high-level producers weighing the cost to completion of the episode. The reality of these scrubbed episodes is that they aren't gone because they were boring. They are gone because they are evidence of a system that sees human suffering as a harvestable resource. All this suffering, all this calculated negligence, and all this human grit was eventually distilled into a single deceptive number: the sanitization of suffering. Everything we've discussed so far, from the planted pigs to the medical negligence, eventually funnels into one specific 3-digit number that you see at the end of every episode: the primitive survival rating, or PSR. Here is the thing about the PSR. It was never actually a scientific measurement of someone's ability to survive in the wild. According to a deep dive by Looper into the untold truths of the show, the PSR is actually a brilliant psychological tool designed to gamify human suffering for an audience. It takes the raw, messy reality of someone starving and losing their mind and distills it into a digestible score that makes the whole experience feel like a video game instead of a potential human rights violation. Think about that for a second, because it's a masterclass in corporate sanitization. When a contestant's score drops from an 8.2 to a 7.1, the audience feels a sense of tension, but they don't feel the actual weight of the organ damage or the psychological trauma happening on screen. It turns the contestant into a data point. According to Insider, many participants realized that the PSR was actually being used as leverage to keep them from tapping out. If you leave early, your legacy rating is ruined, which means you'll never get the call for the All-Stars or XL seasons, where the real money is. The producers aren't just measuring your skills, they are measuring how much exploitation you're willing to tolerate in exchange for a higher digital score. Now, here is where it gets really interesting. The PSR serves as a distraction from the legal reality of the contracts we talked about earlier. While you're debating whether someone deserves a 9.0 for catching a turtle, you're not thinking about the fact that they've signed away their right to sue for the very suffering that earned them that score. It's a staggering way to frame the narrative. According to the interviews with former contestants, the network often uses these ratings to justify why some people were failures and others were heroes, regardless of the actual environmental factors or production interference they faced. If you were standing in the middle of a swamp, literally rotting from the inside out, would a decimal point on a screen make the pain worth it? Every legend has a hero. But in the world of the PSR, the hero is simply the person who didn't let their lawyer stop the cameras. It's a reminder that the show isn't about surviving nature, it's about surviving the machine that films it. We've spent years looking at the blurred bodies on screen, but the truth was always in the vault. We just had to look past the blur to see the machinery underneath. We've looked at the fake pigs and the medical negligence. But here's the thing. In reality TV, the reality is always the first thing removed. Which case was most unethical? Tell me below, and we'll see you in the next one.